Hi, folks. Ed Bixby here from the Global Green Burial Alliance with my lovely co-host, Gretchen Splitzer. Today, we are speaking to Mike Mitchell, a funeral director who's been practicing green burial for an awful long time. So, Gretchen, if you'd like to introduce Mike.
Yes, we have Mike Mitchell with us, and he is owner of Staffan-Mitchell and Caskey-Mitchell Funeral Homes, which is a funeral home in Michigan that has been dedicated to serving families in the Chelsea, Stockbridge, and Washington.
Close.
Oh,
Washington.
that's a long one.
It's a long one.
Bingham, Jackson, Livingston County area since 1853 and 1898, family owned and respected in the community for 160 years. And a little bio on Mike. He's been a licensed funeral director. In 2004, Michael returned to Mitchell Funeral Homes, bringing 10 years of environmental work experience and a passion of green burial to the family business. He attended the Pittsburgh Institute of Mortuary Science and Michigan University.
Nope.
Michael State
Michigan
University.
State University. Big difference.
University, sorry. Michael served 3 years on the board of directors of the Green Burial Council, and at that time was the only licensed funeral director on the board and in the nation with a degree in environmental science. Michael's knowledge about green burial provides further breadth in the special care that Mitchell Funeral Home offers. So, lots of experience. He's been doing it for a long time, and we're really excited to talk with him today.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I'll let you start, Ed.
Sure, absolutely. So, Mike, it's exciting to have you here. You've been doing this for an awful long time, much longer than most funeral directors even knew what natural burial was. So I do appreciate that. And why don't you tell the folks a little bit about what interested you most way back when you first, got involved with natural burial and the Green Burial Council?
Sure. Well, it all started with me leaving the environmental field and rejoining the family business, becoming licensed. And shortly after I became licensed, there was a Michigan Funeral Directors Association meeting, and one of the guests was going to be Joe Seehee, the then executive director of GBC. And when I heard him speak, it just clicked with me, and I said, you know what, this is the oldest, newest trend in funeral service, and I want to be a part of it. And the way the conversation went, the room was kind of divided between younger funeral directors and older funeral directors. And the older generation just couldn't grasp their mind around either home funeral, a natural burial with no embalming or casket or vault, or even, having a visitation without a body embalmed. And so I stood up and I said, hey, one of my funeral homes that my family owns was from 1853. The other one's from 1898. And I know all of you know old funeral directors. Please ask them what we used to do and how the industry started, because the parlor of the house, you may have been born, married, and buried all in the same room. And then you just kind of saw this light go on. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's what we used to do. So that's what got it started for me. And then from there, I met an RN named Mary Lynn Rush, who was working as a death doula and a hospice nurse and an RN at the time. And she had been working with a family, and they chose a different funeral home. And when it came time to actually do what they wanted, they said they couldn't do it. So Mary Lynn called me, and I said, absolutely, let's do it. And that was a long time ago.
That's great. And that was your first one, huh?
That was my very first one, yes. And it was a home vigil, and the people cared for their mother. They kind of decoupaged the cremation box, and they didn't know that they could do a green burial, so that's why they chose cremation. And from there, it's just kind of expanded, and I've helped different organizations form hybrid cemeteries. And in Michigan, that's kind of weird because I can't own or operate a cemetery or a crematory. So I can only advise people how to get this done. And we've been very fortunate in our 4-county area. I think we have 7 or 8 that will actually do green burial or natural burial without a vault. And then we have in Michigan the gold standard, which is the preserves at All Saints, which is quite nice.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know what's interesting, Mike? Michigan's been at it for a while now. I mean, between yourself and between Joe and Mary Lynn Rush, I've known Mary Lynn for years, and even Father Charles Morris.
Sure.
That's kind of where,
Yep.
yeah, that's where the JBC got its footing. I think what people might be most interested in really would be also, how has it affected your business model, Mike? I mean, do you find, I know spiritually it's beneficial, but how does it look business wise when you help these families? Because direct cremation certainly is what, natural burial can replace.
Right. The green burial segment has started out small, but I'd say every year we're increasing by a dozen or so. And I'd say this year we've probably done in some form of natural green burial or home vigil. I'd say we're probably close to 30. And
Good.
Again, it's just my colleagues for the longest time wouldn't touch it. And I just said, this may not be for everyone, but it's got a bigger purpose to it. And if you don't offer it, they're going to go someplace else. So you might as well. The best line I ever heard about this whole thing is Josie, he said this to the Michigan Funeral Directors Group. He said, funeral directors fought cremation. How'd that work out? And the room just kind of went silent. So I've kind of adopted this open-minded policy of, hey, if I'm not doing anything illegal and I can help a family with their final wishes, I'm going to do it. Because seeing this through to make someone's final wishes come true, that's the most gratifying thing I can do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what do you think the reason why your colleagues won't touch it? Do you think it's just because they just don't
I'm going to
know?
be blunt. It's fear of the unknown and a lack of education.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Because again, I tell them to go down in the basement of your old funeral homes, and I bet you have a cooling board. And if you don't know what that is, a cooling board is actually something they would harvest ice and put underneath this chaise lounge thing to keep the body cool at home. So when my favorite saying about green burial is it's the oldest, newest trend in funeral service. And a lot of, I might be over exaggerating, but 90% of the world does this.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
So
yeah, I was reading a comment somewhere online, even like Greece is how they do it. The Netherlands, they all die at home most of the time and have the vigil at home.
Absolutely. So
go ahead, Ed.
no, I just, with that being said, I mean, certainly it is a something that's distinctly in the United States of America, when it comes to the embalming process. But how have you seen the other greener options, Mike? Have you done much with the cremated remains when it comes to planting trees, or is that something you haven't seen yet in your home? Or
in my area, it's still pretty rural. So when people take their remains home, they're not really putting them in a tree, so to speak. They're probably putting them on their farms where they've been for generations. The cemetery kind of has this goofy rule that you can't plant any shrubs or vegetation without permission. So it's tough there. Most of the times it doesn't really involve the native trees or shrubbery. It just involves placing in a green section in a cemetery.
Okay, that's great. Well, it's good to know. I mean, it's growing outwardly, and I'm sure you'll see more of that in the future, no doubt.
Yeah. I did help someone. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, do you see like how many of your green burial funerals are actually in people's homes where you go and help them there?
I'd say it's probably 50-50.
Oh,
And
that's great.
it really depends. It's interesting. There's a church that I help, and a lot of them are first or second generation from Europe, and they have no problem because that's what they grew up doing, having these funerals in the home, and then they go to church, and then we either go to the burial or the crematory. So
That's exactly how it used to be done.
yes, exactly.
From the
Yep.
church, then the men would carry it to the cemetery, and
Correct.
then they would bury it. Yeah.
Correct.
Wow.
We finally got the state of Michigan to give us an opinion that dry ice is considered refrigeration, so we can lean a little bit more on that 48-hour law that we have. Because in Michigan, we're in this great quandary that it's 48 hours buried, embalmed, or cremated, but the doctors also have 48 hours to sign the death certificate. And if it's a medical examiner's case, then obviously they take some time too. That's probably besides finding the right cemetery, getting doctors to sign a death certificate is probably one of our most challenging things right now.
You're not alone with that, Mike. That seems to be, the consensus statewide. But that's good to know that they had that opinion, because certainly, like I tell my families, the moment the loved one is placed under refrigeration, then for all intents and purposes, the clock stops ticking.
Right.
So
I have
yeah,
another
that's great.
question.
Sure.
So when they want a green funeral in the funeral home,
Yeah.
maybe they live in an apartment or something.
Right.
If the family or friends want to come in and do like ritual bathing or anything like that, do you allow that in the funeral home, or what?
Yes.
Oh, that's
Yes.
nice too.
So the Michigan law reads, you have to be a licensed funeral director to place a chemical on a deceased patient. But that doesn't take into consideration religious beliefs or if they choose not to do embalming. So yes, we have had washing ceremonies, you name it.
I think that's great. I don't think, a lot of people realize that funeral homes like yours are open to allowing that, because it's so healing to say goodbye that way,
Exactly. It's
yeah.
entirely, it's religious, it's spiritual, it's healing. And I've said this in probably every interview I've ever done. When I see a family that's either having a home vigil, a green burial, or even, a church visitation instead of at the funeral home where they do 24-hour vigils, I don't get requests for grief resources. These people are taking care of their loved ones, and they're living through it, and they're processing it. It's not just, and I don't want this to sound harsh, but it's not a sterile environment. You're not at the hospital. You don't go to the back of the hospital and then to the crematory and hand someone a box.
Yeah.
And I never realized
that's what happened in my experience. Yeah.
Yeah. It's deeply moving when someone has not done this and taken the steps, and when they come to receive their loved one's remains and you hand them this box, you kind of see this light on their head go on, and it's like, oh, it's over. Yeah.
Yeah. You especially get that feeling when they're sitting on the passenger seat and you're driving home.
Right.
And I really love what you said about living through the experience. It's not a moment.
Right.
It's a process. And I think
100%.
it's so wonderful, that you give people a chance to go through that.
Sure.
Absolutely. And what we always say too is that, the celebration itself is for the living. Of course, you're celebrating the life that was lived, but really it's the ones that you leave behind that need the most care. Mike, so let me ask you a question that I'm sure would resonate with the viewers. Because you are, essentially very much like myself and Gretchen, veterans to this movement, I'm sure there's a lot of new people listening. What would you have to say to a room full of new future funeral directors, who were looking for inspiration? If there was anything you could say to them, What comes to mind, when it comes to the experience and all that?
I would say the biggest thing, whether you're new at anything or young at anything, approach everything with an open mind, because you're going to learn more. You're going to be better for your families. You're going to be better for yourself. If you come into this industry closed-minded, it's going to be hard, because eventually, the funeral directing is one of the oldest professions around, and we're going through this change right now. And it's certainly where you live in Jersey and, southeastern Michigan. These are growing metropolitan areas, and Jersey's huge. At some point in time, we're going to run out of room. And someone that's open-minded in the funeral industry and can think of new ways to serve families with different alternatives is going to go a long way.
Absolutely. That's very sound advice.
And I just
Gretchen?
think, well, I was just going to say, just helping people, helping our culture embrace death, as we faced it through the pandemic,
Right.
is so healing for all of us as a whole. And I think this change that's happening is going to be really wonderful for teaching people how to live better lives.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I can't say that I have a favorite green burial, but this gentleman, he actually wanted to be scattered in Yellowstone Park. And I went, I don't know, but let me call. Because they said, well, why don't we just, kind of do a Shawshank Redemption thing where they sprinkle the dirt through the pant leg and he walks around the yard. And I said, let's not do that. So I called the Park Service, and this has been about 9 or 10 years ago, or I can't remember when, but you can fill out a form with the National Park Service, tell them the day you're going to do it and where you're going to do it. You just can't do it on an established path, but they now allow legally scattering cremated remains in a national park.
Wow.
That's
That's
good to know.
amazing.
Yeah.
And you know what, Mike, and thanks for that information, because there are a lot of services out there, offering places, but my goodness, if you could just go to one of these places without cost to the family,
Right.
that's amazing.
Right.
Well, Mike, we here at the Global Green Burial Alliance really appreciate you coming on today to talk to us. We really appreciate all the hard work that you've done over the years for the Green Burial Council, for your customers, and for the state of Michigan and your communities. We would love to, I'm sure, have you on one of the future forums when we have some funeral directors together. So we'll definitely reach out to you for that. And, we do appreciate it. Gretchen, any sentiments for Mike as we send them off?
Oh, I'm just really glad you reached out. I think that's great, because Ed and I have been reaching out to different people, and that you reached out to us and to connect with you is really great.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks for doing that, and
Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for being
Thank you,
our
Mike.
interviewee.
Absolutely.
So I'm just going to wrap it up by saying, everybody, if you haven't signed the pledge with the Global Green Burial Alliance, go to our website, and if you're a provider, sign the pledge. If you're a consumer, sign the pledge, and follow us on social media. And that's about it. So thanks, everybody.